Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, February 3rd. Happy February, everybody. I hope everyone is having a great day so far. We have a lot to get into, and I know I say that a lot, but this weekend was wild, specifically in the NBA. Two massive trades took place, including a league-altering move that sent Luka Doncic, a top 5 NBA player in the league right now, over to the Lakers in exchange for Anthony Davis and some pieces. We will break down everything that is going on with that trade, everything surrounding that, and much more. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, February 3rd. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the big news of the weekend, the shock of all shock around the NBA world. Luka Doncic has been traded to the Lakers in exchange for Anthony Davis and a couple of other pieces. The full trade details don't really matter that much, honestly. You get Markieff Morris and Max Christie switching teams as well. This is the big move that has been going on around the world. It's a move that was shrouded in secrecy, a move that nobody saw coming, nobody, including Shams Charania, the senior insider for ESPN. This is a massive move, maybe the biggest one in the history of the NBA as far as trade talents go. You're trading a top 5 consensus NBA guy, a guy who has made 5 first-team All-Pro NBA teams in his first 6 seasons. That is what I mean by a consensus top 5 guy, a guy that led his team to the final. A guy that led the league in scoring last year, and yes, he's gone through some injury issues, but this is a guy that should not, by any circumstances, be traded, especially at the age of 25. Anthony asks, with this trade with Luka, do you think that he could have done one for one with Luka and Jimmy? The reason, and we'll get to it, this trade was so shocking. The reason this trade was so shocking was because it was so secretive. And the reason it was so secretive was because nobody knew about it other than the two GMs. In fact, the GM of the Mavericks went rogue. The GM of the Mavericks went rogue, and nobody knew about it. It was just him and the GM of the Lakers. When these two guys got together over coffee on October 7th, they talked about it. The GM of the Lakers laughed in his face. They laughed in his face. They said he didn't think he was serious. And then as we learn more about this coming out, him only going to the Lakers and nobody else, not starting a bidding war here, is insane. Because like I said, Luka, in his prime, at just 25 years old, being traded to the Lakers, one of the preeminent franchises in all of the NBA, to play alongside the GOAT in LeBron James, right? This is a ridiculous trade concept. It's one of those that you put on your trade machines on Twitter. People in 2K couldn't even get this trade to go through. This trade was ridiculous in all angles. So we're going to start from the start here and break this down, right? What does this do good for the Mavericks? What does this do for the Mavericks? Is that it gives them that defensive piece. It gives them that defensive piece of the puzzle that they were missing against the Celtics last year in the playoffs. The issue with that is, as long as you're getting Anthony Davis, who right now, if this trade was simply in a vacuum, if it was only for this season, if this trade took place just in 2025, and then you got to redraft, you got to reset, Luka goes back to Dallas, AD goes back to the Lakers, then in that case, I'm fine with it. But the thing with this move, and the thing that really bugs me the most, is the fact that not only did the GM not tell anybody, Nico Harrison, did he not tell anybody, He went rogue on this. He didn't tell the coach. The owner laughed in his face when he brought up this trade. And at the beginning, the offer was including Dalton Connect and multiple first round picks. So he got negotiated down, just sending over a 2029 first round pick for the Lakers that with Luka on that team probably isn't even going to be that good. Nico Harrison had a press conference after the trade before the Cleveland Cavaliers game where they proceeded to give up 91 points in the first half of that basketball game, the third most all time. They had a press conference and basically they said he didn't fit our culture. You'll see this will work later. And I'm thinking about this franchise on a timeline. One of the big quotes that I saw and one of the things that sticks out to me for why this is just straight up malpractice by the GM, why this is just straight up wrong for the GM to do, despite it being fine, pretty even, honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you, in the very short term. He says, the timeline of this team, I'm looking 4 to 5 years in the future, right? 10 years, I don't know. I might not be here. We might get buried or we might bury ourselves, referring to himself and the coach Jason Kidd here. That quote is not what you want to hear out of a guy that is supposed to be sailing your ship for, if he does it right, the rest of his life, basically. Right? If you're a GM, your goal should be never to get fired. Your goal should be to build for the now, but also build for the future if you can. And you had that in Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic, a guy that averaged 34, 9, and 10 last year. Luka Doncic, a guy that led the league in scoring. A guy that is arguably the second best player in the world right now. A guy that was going to be a Maverick for life, did not ask out, did not want to leave, had found a home in Texas. That is insane that you just all of a sudden snap your fingers and that guy is gone. And it's even crazier that, again, not a single soul knew about this trade. Not a single person outside of Nico Harrison and the GM of the Lakers knew about this trade. Harrison should be out immediately because of this. And I think this is going to work for Dallas, right? I think this trade is going to work in the short term. Anthony Davis has said himself he thinks he's better as a player when he plays that 4 position instead of the 5. And he's going to be able to play that 4 position in Dallas. You team him up with Kyrie Irving and Klay Thompson, and they've got a pretty solid lineup there. There's no doubt about that. There is no doubt about that. In the short term, this Mavericks team is going to be a contender in the West. But you also have to look at the future. And Luka is immediately going to be an MVP caliber player over there with the Lakers. If they can find a way to get a center either this season or in the off season, this team is immediately going to take off. Not only are we going to get to see LeBron James playing with Luka Doncic, which is just going to be a lot of fun to watch, but this team, this Lakers team is going from Kobe, a little bit of a lull there, to LeBron James, and then no lull at all immediately to the next big thing in Luka Doncic. And he's going to have a great time over there in LA. There's no doubt about it. But this is a brutal blow. This is a brutal blow to a fan base that's one of their key things has been loyalty, right? Dirk Nowitzki, another guy coming over from overseas, over in Europe, Eastern Europe, and he comes over and he immediately is the face of that franchise. He is the quintessential Dallas Maverick. You have that MFFL, Maverick for effing life, right? That's their slogan, right? And Mark Cuban was a guy that really stuck by that principle. There was a quote that came out of something he said a little while ago where he said, if I had to choose between trading Luka or divorcing my wife, we would be signing the papers on Monday. Right, and that's not in response to the trade because he sold his majority stake, and he clearly has no hands on this team anymore. But this is one of the biggest blunders of a superstar in NBA history, and it doesn't just hurt the future of their franchise. Right, this hurts Luka personally. This hurts the image of the Mavericks as we head into the future. Luka Doncic was going to be eligible for a $345 million contract with a supermax deal. He now gets traded and is no longer eligible. He's still eligible for that max contract, but the thing with the Supermax and the thing with the NBA is they like to incentivize you being loyal, right? They like to incentivize players not going to a new team, so they avoid getting those super team contracts, right? Getting those super teams together like we saw with the Celtics, with the Heat, and those big threes being built. You get that supermax. Dallas could have been happy. They would have been happy with a guy that made the finals. And the argument, another argument against Luka here, and another reason why they wanted him out was because they said he was fat. They said he was chubby. He got to 270 pounds. And I think we should learn by now, in this basketball world, in this culture of basketball, with arguably the two best players in the world being not stereotypically in shape, we should have seen that that's not a big deal. I understand if you're criticizing a guy like Zion Williamson for getting injured and having injury issues with his weight, but Luka has not had injury issues with his weight. Luka has gone out there and consistently dominated. And if they want to go out there and they want to say that he is not in shape, he's looking a little chubby, who cares? Who cares? Honestly, that is the stupidest argument that you possibly could have put out there for getting rid of Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic is a special player. You should never have ever moved him in a million years. And this feels more like a personal grudge because I don't know what's going on over there, but everything that I'm hearing coming out of this, it just feels like the Mavericks did not like Luka. And maybe he's not a great guy for culture, but that doesn't matter. You build your culture around him in the NBA. In a sport where a single guy can immediately take you to the top, when a single player can immediately make you a contender, like the NBA is, you bend your knee to that guy. That's why the players have so much power in the NBA. There's no other sport where the players have this much power. Patrick Mahomes, as amazing as he is in the NFL, the Chiefs can win without him, right? They can find ways to do it if they build the team the right way, right? It's so important, and that's why he doesn't have all of this control. And that might not be the greatest example because he's a very special player, but it's not like it is in the NBA in any other league where the players have so much power because they can basically control by themselves how a game goes a lot of the time. And that's why we're seeing this. To get rid of Luka is just malpractice by the ownership, by the GM, and he should not have a job right now. I understand. In the short term, it might look good. Like I said, Anthony Davis, what he's going to be able to bring to this team as a two-way player, probably the best two-way player in the entire NBA. What he's going to be able to bring to this Dallas Mavericks team offensively and defensively is something, especially on that defensive end, that Luka could not do. But that doesn't matter. When you have a guy like Luka Doncic, you hold on to him until the ship sinks. You hold on to him like he is a life raft in the middle of the ocean. You do not let that man go. And instead, they just threw caution to the wind and they said, we are shortening our timeline by 10 to 15 years. They went from a timeline with Luka Doncic being dominant for at least the next 10 years to a timeline where they could be dominant for maximum 5 more years, and more likely 2 or 3, potentially 4, right? These guys are old. Anthony Davis is going to turn 32. He's in a month. He's had his issues with injuries in the past. Kyrie Irving has had his issues, and he's getting up there in age. Klay Thompson is already on that downward slope, right? They traded one of the best players in the NBA for a team that is going to fall apart at the seams in a couple of seasons, maybe even quicker if they can't fix this culture. They took this out of nowhere. They blindsided LeBron. They blindsided Shams, and that is not something you want to hear in this day and age in the NBA. And that's why this story was such a big deal. The fact that they were able to pull off one of the biggest trades in NBA history without anybody knowing is not a feeling that you are ever going to see in the NBA ever again. That's why this has been such a big deal, not just because of the players. He's not the biggest player to ever move, but he is the most shocking move that has ever happened in the history of basketball, I think, and it is crazy to see what's going to happen. I think the Lakers, they'll be fine. They still need a center. They need to find a true rim protector if they want to compete this year. But in the future, they're going to be just fine. They have one of the younger rosters. If you take out LeBron, their oldest player is 27 years old. They are going to be just fine for a very, very long time, and they just set up the Lakers for a long, long stretch of success. I can't believe that this one happened. It was shocking. An announcement at midnight that no one believed. People thought he was hacked. And it goes out like this. but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anthony asks, do I blame the franchise in Dallas for giving Luka the power that he wanted? This is where the injuries are coming from because the team doesn't have stricter health policies for the players. It's an interesting point you make. Luka Doncic actually hired his own team, his own health team starting last season. They took care of his diet. They took care of his body. They took care of everything. He hired them with his own money, and the Dallas Mavericks were not happy about that. Last season, he put up his best numbers ever. He led them to a finals, and he did that injured in the playoffs. I don't think this has anything to do with the Mavs' health policy with players, and if they cared that much, the fact that Luka went out and got his own health team, his own nutritionist, his own everything. The fact that they were not okay with that just shows me that this team did not like Luka. Nico Harrison did not like Luka, and for whatever reason, they could not get past that impasse. But again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this trade. One of the wildest thing that's happened in sports in a very, very long time. But that wasn't the only trade that happened around the NBA over that 24-hour stretch. There was one more blockbuster trade. De'Aaron Fox finds his ways to the Spurs. We will talk about that one coming up after the break here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.